Today on Pots and Trowels, I'm going to give container plants a bit of a spring spruce up, and that's brought to you with the support of Cobra Garden, Darlac and Mr Fothergill's. Hello and welcome to Pots and Trowels. Well, after quite a warm spell of weather during March, here we are at the end of the month now, and it's turned a bit cooler and damper. Still what it should be really, so not complaining. So what I'm going to do today is just to look at some of the plants growing in containers, because I and lots of other people grow a good selection of plants in containers. Some of them seasonal, just for colour through the summer and the autumn and the winter, and then things like this camellia here that is growing permanently in a pot so that I can give it exactly the right conditions that it needs. And that's great if you want anything that needs slightly acid soil, but essentially you can grow anything in a container as long as you keep it well watered and fed. And this one is just starting to open up, this double flowering. I love it when it's got the raindrops on there. It's really attractive, and there's lots of buds to come on this one. But looking at it, I've noticed that one or two of the leaves have just started to discolour a little bit, and that's just an indication that it's come through the winter and it's probably just getting a little bit on the hungry side. So now is the perfect time to give all plants, especially anything growing in a container, their breakfast. We go to bed, we wake up, we're hungry, we want breakfast. These have been dormant through the winter, so now they're starting to wake up, they need feeding. So various ways that we can do it, and I do this with all the pots. I'm going to work my way around them. This is a good example of one here. This is actually an apple tree that I've got growing in a pot, and this is quite a big pot. Now, I don't want to go into anything any bigger than this because it's just going to be too difficult to pot this one up, but we can see it's got moss and weeds growing on the top. So what I would do with this is very easily at this time of the year, I'm going to top dress it. So I'm just going to loosen the moss and rake that off. Although it looks quite attractive, it's actually taking nutrients, and the weeds certainly are. So I'm just loosening everything off there using this little tool just to scrape it off. And that top inch or so of compost, which also contains weed seeds that may have blown in over the winter. And then what I'm going to do, just get a bucket to put that in, which I've got just here. Scrape that out. That of course can still go on the compost bin. It will rot down, so it will add humus back to the garden in a different form. So all the moss, all the weeds, and that top layer of compost I've scraped off. And then what I'm going to do with that is to feed it, and I'm going to use a slow release fertilizer. These are granules. You can buy them under various different names. Just spotted another bit of weed there. If you don't take them out, they'll grow. But this is a slow release fertilizer or controlled release fertilizer. You can get in all garden centres under different names. And these little baubles, people often think when they see them, like here, there's some old ones on the compost here. If I squash them, they're full of water. And very often people ask me if these are slug eggs. Well, no, they're not. These are the old fertilizer capsules that, sorry, George, did I get you? That are being used. These are new ones. So what I'm going to do is just sprinkle some of those over there. All the instructions will be on the packet to the amount, but that is more than enough. And then what I'm going to do, again using this little fork, is just mix that in to the surface, because what it does, it starts to release the nutrients when it's in contact with moist compost or soil, and when the temperatures rise. So as the temperatures do get warmer through the spring, they will gradually release that nutrients within them down to the roots so that it'll keep it healthy. And then to finish it off, I'm just top dressing with a bit of fresh compost. So just 2 or 3 big handfuls of compost on there. That will seal in the fertilizer, and it just makes it look a little bit better. Also has a little bit of nutrition in there, and it encourages some better roots in the pot. So instantly we've made that look so much better. And I'm going to do the same. We've got a little box here that I'm going to toperize, but you can see it's got weeds growing. So it's a case of going round, taking all the weeds out and doing the same with the fertilizer. Likewise, this is a bay tree, quite a tall column bay. And again, this is not looking quite as it should be. It's got, instead of it being a very dark green glossy leaf, this one's almost a matte olivey colour. Now that's an indication of either lack of nutrients or too dry at the roots, and it's been in this pot for probably 10 years and I can't get it out of the pot without smashing it. So what I have to do is just keep feeding it well all the way through the summer. So I could do the same trick, I could loosen the compost, but this is really quite hard and full of roots, so it's difficult to do it. But if you can, loosen the compost, fertiliser and a bit more compost. But what I'm going to do with this, just to give it a tonic at this time of the year, is I'm going to feed it with some seaweed, liquid seaweed, which has got lots of minerals and nutrients in there, and it's a really good one just to give them that kickstart. And then I will feed it regularly through the season. So it's just a case of lifting the foliage, and it is actually, despite all the rain we've had this winter, that's surprisingly dry, that compost under there, and it's quite hard. So what I'm going to do is just give it a good drink. You can see the colour there of the seaweed in that feed. Just make sure it goes right the way to the edge, and I'll let that soak down, and then I'll probably give it another top up to make sure that that goes all the way down to the roots. And you can use the seaweed feed on everything in a container, whether it's things like this temporary container for a bit of seasonal colour here with just a few dwarf shrubs and some primulas. It's a good one to use on a regular basis just to keep them supplied with nutrients. And finally, you might have things growing in pots. I always grow a few herbs in pots. This is a sage that was potted last year, and this is an oregano marjoram here, and it's got the remains of last year's flowers on. Now I could do two things with this, and I probably will do them both. First of all, I'm going to give it a tidy up, so I'm just using my secateurs, and these are last year's flower heads. Doesn't matter if we also trim one or two of the shoots off there as well, because they will bush out and grow, but that will now encourage that into growth. So I'm just giving it a haircut, a number one all over, so it looks better. There's a weed growing in there, look, there's a piece of grass, so I'm just going to make sure we get that out with the root. Now this is quite a pot bound one, as you can see. It's been in this pot now for a couple of years. So what I could also do with this is to go into a bigger pot. If you've got a pot that's just 2 or 3 inches bigger, then I could carefully knock that out of the pot. That looks better just for doing that. Knock it out of the pot, and then put it into a bigger pot, or you could divide it. There's still time to divide it, but I think that would be fine for another year as long as you keep it watered. And what I tend to do with this is stand it on a saucer through the summer months so that it never dries out. And again, with liquid feeding, that will make a massive foliage, and the flowers are brilliant at attracting bees and pollinators into the garden. And other things like this one, this is a sage here. They tend to do this, it's nothing wrong with it, but you get leaves over the winter that die. So it's just a case of going over it and just giving it a tidy up. So we can be feeding, we can be top dressing with fertiliser and compost, we can be trimming back, we can be taking off dead leaves, just to make sure that all the plants that we've got growing in containers get off to a good start this spring, and then we'll hopefully continue to look really good right the way through the winter. So I've got a fair bit of work on here for the next hour or so, top dressing them and getting them ready. Well, thank you for watching us on Pots and Trowels. Remember, all the videos that we've done over the past 2.5 years you can find on YouTube, so you can see everything we've been doing. Next week, weather permitting, we will be doing some work on the lawn, so we'll see you then. Bye.